The Honourable Member Sua William Sia. Tolofalava.
Tolofalava, Mr. Speaker. I'm happy to rise and make some remarks around the Local Electoral Amendment Bill number 2 and say that Labour supports this bill. We've had a similar bill in the ballot for months now, drafted by the Honourable David Cunliffe to address what many would call the ridiculous situation we've seen regarding John Banks and his so-called anonymous donations. We're pleased that this bill has finally been allowed to advance, and hopefully that it will be advanced in time to be used in the upcoming election, local government elections on 12th of October this year. It's a bill that is strongly supported by the professional organisations, namely our slogan, the Society for Local Government Managers and Local Government New Zealand. And there are obvious reasons that are well known throughout New Zealand as to why this is such a critical bill to finally be advanced to final reading. These organisations and many others who value local government believe that aligning the Local Electoral Act provisions for donations more consistently with those provisions in the Electoral Act 1993, which applies to parliamentary elections, is a great thing. And there's general consensus from this side of the House that the amendments this bill provides would enhance transparency and accountability in local elections. And all of us that value local government anticipate these provisions will hopefully in turn increase the public confidence and trust in our local electoral system. While the Electoral Act, which provides for parliamentary elections, has been revised 3 times in the last 5 years, in 2007 and 2009, and in 2010 to strengthen and clarify its provisions, and for example requiring more disclosure and reporting of donations by candidates and third parties. Or other examples is to limit the size of anonymous donations so that there is greater openness about who is financially financing whom. And the Electoral Act, however, has not undergone a review of its donation provisions since 2001. In effect, there's been no limit in the amount of money that can be donated anonymously. But I think, sir, what is critical is that the House agrees that the situation that occurred in 2010 with one particular candidate should not ever happen again, particularly when you have a candidate who meets up and engages with a potential donor, receives a donation, asks that donor to then split up the particular donation, and despite knowing the name of the donor, actually receives some reports as if the recipient of the donation did not know the donor. So, sir, I think this bill here, Labour is very happy to support it. We're happy to support also the supplementary order paper that's being introduced in terms of providing more transparency and clarity around trusts who provide donations. I think, sir, it's important, and I want to just highlight some of the key things which I think people would appreciate, particularly in the public, that there's going to be a limit to the size of anonymous donations that a candidate can retain. That limit will now be $1,500 as opposed to having unlimited donations. There's going to be a requirement on a third party who receives a donation on behalf of a candidate to disclose the identity of the donor to the candidate, so that there is no excuse whatsoever for candidates who seem to find joy in playing around with the rules and pretending like they don't know the donors that made donations to them. There is going to be a requirement that a person administering the affairs of a candidate who receives an anonymous donation of more than $1,500 on behalf of the candidate to also disclose the identity of the donor to the candidate. And I think it's also a good thing, sir, that there is going to be a requirement that candidate statement includes whether or not the candidate's principal place of residence is in the local government area in question. And there have been cases, sir, where a candidate may not necessarily reside in that electoral boundaries of the electorate where they're standing, either for council or mayor or local board, but they'll use that for one reason or another, which plainly I think many of the voters understand is just plain wrong for deception purposes. I think in particular, sir, the ability to now prosecute or take prosecution and the ability to include any prosecutions from 6 months from the date the prosecutor is satisfied that there is sufficient evidence to warrant the commencement of proceedings, but no later than 3 years after the offence was committed, is a good thing, considering, sir, we've also had a case latterly in the last local body elections where clearly there was a breach of the rules and the police were unable to do anything about it because they'd run out of time. And so I join with the rest of my colleagues on the Labour Party side to say, yes, it is about time that this bill finally receives the third reading, and yes, we agree that this is a bill that ought to provide security and confidence and more transparency in the local government elections. It aligns well with the particular legislation that also administers parliamentary elections. And in my view, sir, it hopefully puts a stop to the kind of candidacy that we've seen in the last local body elections, who clearly didn't care one iota about keeping with the rules. And so I'm hopeful that the new provisions will deter any candidate who might have the John Banks syndrome of believing that they are above the law from flouting the law and maintaining and keeping within the limits that this bill now provides. But I think the thing that most voters will appreciate, and I hope that they take on board, is that there is now greater requirement for any candidate who may choose to run either for mayor or councillor or local board members. There is now a greater requirement on them to declare the amount of money that they are receiving, particularly identifying who the potential donor is, if that donor happens to be an anonymous donor. And so there is going to be greater requirement that they hold on to their financial reporting. They don't destroy that. And clearly also, sir, the police will have the ability to be able to prosecute any person that is found to have broken the rules, and they can do so within a 3-year period, which I think is sufficient time for the public to raise any concerns they might have, and sufficient time for the police also and others who might want to do some investigatory work and to find out whether certain candidates are aware of the donors that are donating money to them, and to ensure that there's openness, transparency, and I think some confidence, sir, greater confidence, because this government keeps talking on, sir, keeps going on about how trustworthy they are, but we know clearly, sir, that by this government aiding and abetting a certain candidate who's now in this House, I would say, sir, this is a good thing. And so I commend this bill for the House, and hopefully it prevents the attitudes and the behaviour that we've seen from the candidates, particularly the certain candidate of 2010.
I call the Honourable Member Holly Walker.
Thank you.